On the distant planet Zerfer, the sky was always purple, and the ground shimmered with blue dust. Strange creatures moved slowly through the forests, glowing with soft light. In the middle of the planet stood a grand palace made of crystal and metal. This was the home of Queen Alexa and her 3 powerful daughters. They were not ordinary aliens. They were princesses of the high blood, proud, strong, and feared across the galaxy. The eldest sister Velia was cold and serious. She rarely smiled and believed emotions were a weakness. The second sister Sira was clever and cruel. She enjoyed making jokes at the expense of others. The youngest, Nira, was playful and full of energy, but still proud like her sisters. Together, they ruled the outer lands of Zerfer, and no one dared to challenge them. To these sisters, humans were nothing. They believed Earth species were soft, weak, and stupid. Sira once said, "Humans use fire to cook, we use stars." Velia agreed. "They are still learning how to travel space." "We build galaxies," Nira laughed. "They cry when they lose a game, how sad." But everything changed one evening. A loud boom shook the sky. Guards rushed to the towers and looked up. Something was falling from the stars, burning and spinning. It crashed into the mountains with fire and smoke. A strange ship, not Zerfer tech, not from any known world. The sisters watched from the palace balcony, their eyes sharp and curious. "What is it?" Nira asked. "Maybe a lost explorer," Sira said, smiling. Velia stared with cold eyes. "Send a team. Bring back whoever survived." An hour later, the royal guards returned. They carried a tall figure in a silver suit, burned and damaged. His helmet was broken, and blood ran down his face, but he stood on his own feet. He looked around calmly, as if nothing surprised him. "This is the human," the guard said. "He calls himself Elias." The sisters stood before him in the palace throne room. Their dresses glowed like stars, and their eyes burned with power. They expected fear, they expected begging, but Elias simply stood still, his hands behind his back. He didn't bow, he didn't speak, he just watched, silent and calm. "This is it?" Sira asked. "A human?" "He looks broken. He smells like dust and smoke," Nira added. "Does he even understand us?" Velia asked. Elias finally spoke. "I understand you." His voice was quiet but clear. "Then speak." Velia said, "Why are you here?" "I crashed," he replied. "I came alone." Sira laughed. "One human on a planet of gods. How brave or how stupid?" "Maybe both," Nira said with a smile. But Elias didn't react. He kept his face still, his eyes scanning the room. He looked at the guards, the windows, the lights, everything. It was like he was studying them. That night, the sisters watched him from the high balcony. He was kept in the crystal chamber. With guards outside, he sat on the floor, staring at the stars above Zerfer. "What is he doing?" Nira asked. "Maybe he's praying," Sira said. "Or maybe he's planning," Velia said softly. Inside the chamber, Elias took out a small device. It looked broken, with wires sticking out and a cracked screen. He pressed a button and whispered, "Phase 1 complete." The screen blinked red for a second, then shut down. Outside, no one noticed the faint signal that left the device. It moved fast through the sky, far beyond Zerfer, to a place only Elias knew, back in the palace. The sisters laughed and went to sleep. To them, the human was just a toy, a joke. But deep in the shadows of the mountains, something had already begun to move. Something not from Zerfer, not alien, but human. And it was coming. The next morning. On Zerfer was colder than usual. The winds from the northern mountains carried whispers through the sky. And in the palace, whispers had already started to spread. Guards talked quietly in the halls. Servants avoided the crystal chamber where Elias was kept. They said the human never slept. They said he just sat there, watching the stars. Some said his eyes glowed in the dark. Others believed he was not just a human, but something else. But the sisters didn't care. To them, he was still a weak earth creature, full of pride, but empty inside. That morning, Velya ordered Elias to be brought to the garden court. The court was surrounded by floating plants and glowing trees. Even the air sparkled with golden dust. It was beautiful, perfect, the kind of place only royals were allowed to walk. Elias stood in the middle of the garden, still wearing his torn uniform. His face was calm, but his eyes moved fast, observing everything, measuring everything. Velya walked toward him, her voice sharp like glass. "You are not on your planet." "Human," she said. "You are not among friends." Elias nodded. "I know." Sira smiled as she circled him like a cat around its prey. "You don't seem afraid," she said. "That's interesting." "Fear comes later," Elias replied softly. Nira laughed from her floating seat. "He talks like he's in a movie." Then Velya asked the question they were all thinking. "Who are you, really?" Elias looked at them. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he touched the small device still tied to his wrist. It blinked once, green. Then he said, "I am a scout." "A scout?" Sira asked, raising an eyebrow. "For what?" "For what comes after," Elias replied. The sisters paused, just for a moment. It was the first time the human's words felt heavy, real, dangerous. But Nira laughed again, breaking the tension. "Maybe he's just trying to sound important," she said. "Maybe," Velya said, though her eyes stayed on him a little longer than before. After that, they decided to test him. If he was so calm, so confident, they would break that. The sisters took him to the battle arena. It was a floating platform above a lava lake, protected by force fields. Here, warriors trained, weapons were tested, and sometimes enemies were punished. They gave Elias a choice: face the arena beasts or answer their questions under mind probe. He chose the beasts. That surprised even Velya. Most creatures begged for the probe. No one chose to face the living weapons of Zephyr. The crowd gathered. Sisters sat high above, watching, curious, amused. Elias walked into the arena alone. No armor, no helmet. Only his human body. The gate opened, and out came a six-legged beast with metal bones and lava eyes. It roared loud enough to shake the glass shields. Most thought Elias would run. Some thought he would cry, but he didn't move. Instead, he whispered something again. Phase 2. His device blinked twice, red and then blue. Suddenly, his body moved faster than any human should. He rolled under the beast's claws, jumped onto its back, and hit the small glowing spot behind its neck. The beast dropped to the ground, twitching, then stopped moving. Silence fell over the arena. Sira stood up. He cheated. He knew where to hit, Velya said. That's not instinct. That's training, Nira whispered. That was kind of cool. After the fight, they locked Elias back into the crystal chamber. But now things had changed. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was something trained. Something dangerous, and perhaps something sent for a purpose. That night, Velya met secretly with the palace AI. She asked it to scan Elias's body for implants or tech. But the AI responded, "This human carries no foreign tech within his body, but his nervous system is enhanced by nanites. Human science can't do that." Velya said, "Correction," the AI replied. "Earth's known science cannot." Far away from the palace, on the edge of Zephyr's system, a small object blinked into existence. It looked like a rock, but inside it, machines were waking up. It had received Elias's Phase 2 signal. It opened its core, revealed a hidden message, and began sending a signal back to Earth. The message was short: "Scout has made contact. Zephyr is vulnerable." Elias sat in the crystal chamber, silent as always. The room glowed with soft blue light, walls made of energy and glass. Guards watched him from a distance, whispering, afraid to stand too close. They had seen what he did in the arena. No ordinary human should have survived, let alone won. But Elias was not ordinary. And deep inside, the sisters knew it too. Velya couldn't sleep that night. She walked through the silent halls of the palace, her mind full of questions. How did the human defeat a Zephyr beast with no weapons? Why did he show no fear, no emotion, even under pressure. And what was that strange device he always touched? In the shadows, the AI voice echoed softly. Elias has no known history in galactic databases. He does not exist in any star registry. Velia narrowed her eyes. Then where did he come from? The eye paused, then answered. He came from Earth. Back in the chamber, Elias stared at the stars through the transparent ceiling. He wasn't looking at Zephyrs' sky. He was waiting. Suddenly, the device on his wrist blinked green 3 times. He smiled, very slightly, then whispered, "They've arrived." Far above the planet, something had entered the outer orbit. It didn't shine like a ship. It didn't make noise. It looked like a shadow, a glitch in the stars, but it moved with purpose at the same time. Strange energy pulses began appearing across the planet, in abandoned ruins, in deep caves, in quiet oceans. Things began to awaken, things that weren't from Zephyr, but they were already here, hiding, waiting. The next morning, Nira visited Elias alone. She brought fruit from her private garden. Glowing green and purple, she placed it in front of him and smiled. "You don't eat?" she asked. Elias looked at the fruit, then at her. "I do," he said, "but only when I trust the hands that offer it." Nira raised an eyebrow, surprised by the answer. "You don't trust me?" "You laugh too easily," Elias said, "but your eyes ask serious questions." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her sisters. "You're different," she said quietly. "I know," Elias replied. Meanwhile, Sira and Velia were in the war room. They were watching planet-wide scans, energy spikes, magnetic shifts, and strange signals were growing. "What is happening to our world?" Sira asked. Velia replied, "It started when the human arrived. They decided to move him to a deeper, darker chamber, where not even starlight could enter. He was dangerous. They had to find the truth before something worse happened." Elias didn't resist. He walked calmly as 4 guards surrounded him. But as they passed through the palace halls, something strange happened. The lights flickered, the air became heavier, and a voice echoed through the communication towers. "Scout 3, this is command. Your signal is clear." All the palace systems froze for 5 seconds. Guards looked around in panic. "Who was that?" One of them shouted, but Elias said nothing. He only smiled. Down in the dark chamber, he was chained with energy cuffs. Sira came to interrogate him herself. She stood behind a glass wall, holding a control pad. "We want answers," she said. "Who are you talking to? What is your mission?" Elias looked at her calmly. "You'll know soon," he said. "Too late, maybe." Sira slammed her hand on the control pad. Energy flowed through the cuffs, sending shockwaves into Elias's body. He didn't scream, he didn't move. He just stared at her, like he was used to pain, like he had been through worse. Suddenly, alarms echoed through the palace. Unknown objects had entered Zephyr's orbit, cloaked, silent, but massive, more than 10. All surrounding the planet, the royal defense systems went into lockdown. Fighters launched into the sky. The queen herself appeared in the command tower, her face stone cold. "What are these ships?" she asked. "Where are they from?" No one knew. No symbols, no warnings, no signals, just silence back in the dark chamber. Elias whispered again. "Phase 3. His cuffs unlocked automatically. The energy fields flickered and died. Sira stared in shock as he stood up freely. "You were never alone," she whispered. Elias stepped toward the glass wall. "I never needed to be," he said, "because I'm not the first." And far in space, above the planet, a single human voice came through every radio in the galaxy. "This is the Human Federation. Zephyr, prepare for contact." Panic spread across Zephyr like wildfire. The palace guards scrambled. Generals shouted into silent radios. Above the sky, 10 unknown ships floated quietly, not attacking, not speaking, just watching. The queen stood in the war chamber, her face blank but her hands trembling slightly. No empire had dared to surround Zephyr before. This was new. This was dangerous. "Where are the ships from?" The queen asked the palace AI. The AI replied, "Unmarked vessels, cloaked in old Terran stealth code." "Terran?" The queen repeated. "Earth code?" "Yes," the AI confirmed. "Human in origin." The sisters gathered in silence. Velia stood still, her arms crossed. Sira looked nervous. Chewing her lower lip, Nira whispered, "Is Elias ... doing this?" The queen turned sharply. "Where is the human?" she asked. Sira looked down. "He escaped the lower chamber." Velia added, "We underestimated him." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You underestimated Earth." Meanwhile, Elias walked alone through the eastern garden. The guards had been pulled back, the palace in chaos. He moved calmly, his device blinking blue once every minute. He looked at the flowers, at the glowing statues. He touched nothing. He was waiting for someone, and then she came. Nira stepped out from behind the vine wall. She held no weapon, no fear in her eyes, only curiosity. "You did all this?" she asked. Elias looked at the sky, then at her. "No," he said. "We did." Nira frowned. "You're not here to destroy us." "No," Elias replied. "We're here to wake you up." Before she could speak again, his device blinked. Green twice. That was the signal. The queen had made contact in the inner tower. A hidden chamber opened, one not even the sisters had seen. It was a communication room older than the palace itself. Inside stood a dusty console, blinking with life for the first time in 100 years. The queen stood before it alone. A hologram appeared, human, strong, gray-haired. Wearing an old Earth battlesuit, he spoke calmly. "I am High Admiral Reese of the Human Federation. You are Queen Alexa of Zerfer. We know your planet holds something we need." The queen remained silent. She stared at the hologram, remembering a time when humans were nothing, primitive, small, unimportant. But now, they had surrounded her world without firing a shot. They had entered without warning. "What do you want?" the queen asked. Reese replied, "Something you stole from Earth. 80 years ago, a blueprint." Alexa's eyes darkened. She had hoped they'd never find out. She had hoped the war records were lost forever. "You speak of the neural design," she said slowly. Reese nodded. "That blueprint is not just science," he said. "It's survival." The queen said nothing, but deep inside, she remembered the deal she had made. A secret alliance with a rogue human scientist during Earth's darkest war. She had offered him safety. In return, he gave her something Earth never meant to share. A code that could enhance any living brain, alien or human. The very thing Elias carried in his blood. That was why he was fast, why he was calm, why he could outthink machines. He wasn't a spy, he was proof. Back in the garden, Nira sat beside Elias on the edge of a glowing pond. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "Why not just take what you want and leave?" Elias looked at the water. "Because I was born from stolen knowledge," he said. "But I believe peace is still possible." Nira blinked. "That's a very human thing to say." "I know," Elias said softly. "I learned it from my mother." Nira turned to him slowly. "Was she?" "Yes," he nodded. "One of your people." That truth hit harder than any invasion. Nira stood up in shock. "A Zerfer woman?" "Not royal," Elias said, "but brilliant." In the shadows, Sira had been listening. She ran to Velia, her voice shaking. "He's not just human," she whispered. "He's part Zerfer." Velia's face turned pale. That changed everything. Because under Zerfer law, no mixed blood was allowed to walk free. But more importantly, no royal could harm someone of shared blood. That meant Elias was protected by their own laws. Later that night, the queen returned to her throne. She had made a choice. She activated a hidden beacon buried under the palace. It sent out a signal to the Human Federation. "We are ready to talk. Peace or war." The decision would be made soon. But one thing was clear. Elias was no longer just a prisoner. He was now the key to Zerfer's future, and perhaps to its throne. Zerfer was changing. The skies were still purple. The trees still glowed. But the silence was different now. It was not peace. It was the breath just before a storm. Since the Queen's private message to the Human Federation, nothing had been. The same guards redoubled, meetings were quiet, and the three alien sisters were no longer sure of their place. Velia was angry, Sira was confused, and Nira was thinking too much about Elias. They all knew one thing: the king was returning. The Queen had ruled Zerfer alone for decades. The king had gone into exile after the war with the Seraphites. Many believed he was dead, but now his ship had been spotted entering the system. And the Queen had summoned him back for one reason: to decide Elias's fate in the Grand Hall. The sisters waited in silence. The sound of the king's ship landing echoed through the floors. Nira fidgeted. Sira bit her lip. Velia stood tall. But her heart raced. Then the doors opened. He walked in, taller than any alien in the room. His armor was black with golden edges, and his eyes held the weight of galaxies. He was not just a king, he was Zirian, the first blade of Zerfer. He looked at his daughters, one by one. Then his voice filled the room like thunder wrapped in silk. Which of you mocked the human? No one answered, because all of them had. At first, the king turned toward Elias, who stood calmly near the throne stairs. You came here alone, the king said. You stood against a beast, survived our prison, and now you walk free. Elias nodded. Because I am not your enemy. But you are not our guest either, the king replied. The Queen stepped forward, her voice steady. He carries our blood. He is protected by our law. The king looked at Elias again. So, you are the child of Zerfer and Earth. That is true, Elias replied. Everyone waited for the king's judgment. Some thought he would imprison Elias. Others thought he would send him back to Earth. But no one expected what he said next. Then you will become royal, the king announced. You will marry one of my daughters. The room froze. Even the palace lights dimmed for a second. Sira gasped. Velia's hands curled into fists. Nira's heart skipped. What? Velia said sharply. Is this a joke? Sira asked, but the king did not blink. He spoke again louder. By ancient law, blood mixed with royalty must be brought into the line. Elias is proof of our past mistakes and our future strength. Nira looked at Elias. He looked back, his expression unreadable. This is madness, Velia said. We are not toys. Sira added. The king nodded slowly. No, he said. You are queens in training, and your choices will decide the future of Zerfer. The Queen stepped in, her tone calm but clear. Let them choose, she said. Let each sister decide. Velia turned her back. I will never marry a human, she said. Sira smiled coldly. I might, if I can control him, Nira said. Nothing. She simply looked at Elias and whispered, Would you even want one of us? Elias answered softly, I want what brings peace. I was raised on Earth, but I bleed Zerfer too. I don't want war, the king nodded. Then we begin a trial, he said, a test. Each sister would spend one day with Elias. No guards, no masks, only time and truth. At the end, Elias would choose, and the chosen sister must accept. The sisters left the room in silence. The game had changed, no longer a battle of strength or blood. Now it was a matter of heart, power, and control. That night, Velia stood on her balcony. She stared at the stars with cold fire in her eyes. He thinks we are equals, she said. I will remind him what royalty means. Sira lay in her private pool, thinking deeply. If I win him, she whispered, I control both Earth and Zerfer. But Nira stood in the garden where she first spoke to Elias. She remembered how calm he was, how honest his voice sounded. She didn't want power. She just wanted to know the truth. Elsewhere, Elias stood alone in a quiet room. He looked at a small photo hidden in his device. A woman with violet skin and human eyes. His mother, he whispered. Tomorrow it begins. And in space, above Zerfer, the human ships waited quietly, watching, listening, ready, *, each would Spend one full day alone with Elias. No cameras, no advisors, no guards. Only the human and the truth. The first day belonged to Velya, the eldest, the coldest, the one who never lost a single duel in her life. She chose to take Elias to the War Dome, a place where royal commanders trained, where strategy was more important than emotion, where feelings were left at the door. Velya wore black armor, sharp and flawless. Elias walked beside her, calm as ever. "Do you know why I brought you here?" She asked. "Yes," Elias said. "You want to testify I'm weak?" Velya raised an eyebrow, impressed. She activated the simulation room. A glowing field surrounded them. Hundreds of holograms appeared. War zones, battles, decisions. Velya gave him control. "Win this battle without killing anyone," she said. Elias didn't blink. His hands moved across the console. He issued commands, shifted patterns, and used decoys. In under 5 minutes, the battle was won. 0 casualties. Velya stared at the screen. "I've never seen that strategy," she whispered. Elias looked at her. "It's not from Zerfer," he said. "It's from Earth, where we lose more, so we learn to save more." They sat after that for hours, talking, not just about war, but about power, responsibility, and the fear of being wrong. At sunset, as he turned to leave, Velya said quietly, "You surprised me." That's a rare thing. The next day belonged to Sira, the second sister, the one who hid knives behind smiles. She took Elias to the floating bazaar, a beautiful, chaotic place in the sky where no rule ever lasted for more than a minute. "I don't care about war," Sira said. "I care about minds." She led him through merchants, mind readers, illegal tech vendors, and charm sellers. She watched how he handled greed, fear, temptation, and lies. She tried to confuse him, to trap him in his own thoughts. But Elias never flinched. He bartered without raising his voice. He turned down a neural drink that could show anyone's true emotions. He didn't ask her any questions that annoyed her. "Why aren't you curious about me?" she finally snapped. Elias smiled lightly. "Because I already know what you're afraid of." Sira laughed, bitter and sharp. "Oh, really? You fear someone knowing the real you," Elias said. "You use games to hide your loneliness." Her laughter stopped. The floating bazaar faded behind them, and in the quiet of her private chamber, she asked, "Do humans fall for people like me?" Elias replied gently, "Only if we're allowed to see who you really are." The third day belonged to Nira, the youngest, the one who had laughed the most, but questioned the deepest. She took Elias nowhere grand. No war domes, no bazaars. She brought him to her favorite spot, a quiet hill near the southern lakes, where she used to go when she wanted to feel small under the stars. They sat on the grass, no guards in sight, no tech, no power plays, just air and sky and questions. "Did you know I would be here?" she asked. "No," Elias said, "but I hoped." "Why?" "Because you were the only one who asked me if I wanted to marry." Nira smiled sadly. "You don't want power." "I want peace," Elias replied. "I want a world where I don't have to explain my blood to anyone." They spoke about childhoods. His raised in a quiet base on the moon, half loved, half researched. Hers, raised with titles, praise, and crushing expectations. When the sun fell and stars bloomed, Nira stood. "If I said no to the king's order, what would you do?" "I would still hope for your friendship," Elias replied. "But I would never force anything." Nira looked at him for a long time. "You're not like other humans." "I'm not like other aliens either," he said. That night, all three sisters returned to the throne hall. The king sat on his seat, hands folded. Elias stood before him. "Now it was time. You have seen them," the king said. "You have known their strength, their weakness, their hearts. Whom will you choose?" The room was silent. No one breathed. Even the stars seemed to pause outside the glass roof. Elias looked at each sister, one by one, then spoke. "I choose." Suddenly, the ground shook, the palace lights flickered. An explosion roared in the distance. A royal messenger ran in, screaming, "Emergency! Unknown ships have entered our system. Not Earth, not Zerfer, they are Seraphites. The past war's enemies, the ancient destroyers, the ones everyone thought were extinct." The king stood, his voice turning to steel. "The trials are over. This is no longer about marriage. This is about survival." Elias turned to the sisters, and this time it was he who asked, "Will you stand with me?" Alarms screamed through the palace walls. The sky of Zerfer, once calm and violet, had turned black. Dark ships filled the heavens like a disease. The Seraphites had returned. They were silent, deadly, and ancient. They did not send warnings. They did not send messages. They just arrived. The queen stood on the main tower. Her eyes narrowed. "This can't be," she whispered. "We destroyed them decades ago." But the truth floated above her, 10 times stronger, 10 times angrier. In the war chamber, Elias and the king stood face to face. This was not a trial anymore. This was a war council, and for the first time they stood on the same side. "We cannot win with firepower," Elias said. "They are too many." "Then what do we have?" the king asked. Elias looked at the 3 sisters. "Unity," he replied. Velia stepped forward, her voice sharp. "I have trained my whole life for war." Sira followed. "I know how to think like an enemy." And Nira looked at Elias and simply said, "I trust you." The king nodded slowly. "Then let it be written," he said. "The future of Zerfer is not decided by blood, but by those who bleed for it." As the planet prepared for battle, Elias stood before a private console, his device connected to the Federation ships still orbiting silently. "Begin Protocol Orion," he whispered. A hidden code passed through space, unlocking old technology Earth once feared to use again. Earth and Zerfer would fight as one. In the command ship above, Admiral Reese received the code. He stared at the screen, then spoke into his mic. "The boy has grown," he said. "Deploy the sky shields." Below, the palace turned into a fortress. The queen activated the heart core, the ancient defense buried under the city. The sisters each took command of a division, and Elias led the unity strike, an army of both humans and aliens who trusted only him. The first wave of Seraphites attacked like shadows. Silent weapons, no light, no heat. But Elias had studied their code. He had seen it long ago, burned into his mother's memories. "Now!" he shouted. Human ships dropped EMP nodes across the battlefield. Zerfer drones lit the sky in synchronized patterns. They couldn't destroy the Seraphites, but they could blind them, and that was enough. Velia led a flank that split the enemy. From the west, she didn't blink as her ship was hit. She fought with rage, but now it was focused. Now it had purpose. Sira hacked into Seraphite comms. She sent false commands, confused their units, broke their formations. She smiled as chaos rained down, controlled chaos, her favorite kind. Nira flew beside Elias. She didn't fire much, but she shielded him when his ship was damaged. She didn't ask why. She just knew he was meant to survive. Then it happened. The Seraphite mothership arrived, 10 times larger than any ship Zerfer had ever seen. It blocked the stars. It bent the clouds. The king took his command throne. "We strike at the heart," he said, but Elias shook his head. "No," he replied. "We show them ours first." He opened a signal to the Seraphite mothership. He spoke calmly. "I am Elias, child of Earth and Zerfer. You tried to erase us once and failed. We offer you one chance." There was silence, then a voice, cold, alien, ancient. "You are a mistake," it said. "You should not exist." Elias smiled. "That's what makes me dangerous." And he flew into the mothership, alone. Nira screamed, "No." But the queen said, "Let him go. He carries what they fear most." Inside, Elias activated the final part of Protocol Orion. A pulse, not a bomb. A message encoded in human Zerfer language. Not to kill, but to infect. The Seraphite system broke apart from the inside. Their machines began to feel. Their logic turned to confusion. Their targeting failed. Elias's ship began to break apart. He whispered, "Phase 4. Then everything went white for 10 long minutes. No. One spoke, not in the palace, not in orbit, not on Earth. Everyone waited. Then the sky cleared, the Seraphite ships faded, and one ship, broken, but alive, floated back to Zephyr. Elias had survived barely, but he had won. The king stood before the people and raised his voice. "We have seen the strength of humans and the heart of Zephyr. Let them be one." He turned to his daughters. "Who among you will walk beside this human?" Velia stepped forward. "I will always protect him," she said. Sira followed. "I will always challenge him." Then Nero walked to Elias and took his hand. "I will always believe in him." Elias looked at the king and smiled. "I choose all three," he said. There was silence, then laughter, then applause. Not for love, but for hope. Because sometimes to unite two worlds, you don't need power. You just need someone who belongs to both.